In the last video, we talked about starting where you were and starting with what you have. And in this video, in this segment, we're going to talk about progressing iteratively with feedback. Is that right, Chris?
That's absolutely correct, because it's this I would say this idea that anytime you do like projects, the old way of doing projects. So I am a PMP, a project management professional. And back in 2005, when I got my PMP, the way the majority of people looked at projects where you would do this planning, right? A lot of planning up front, because when you execute on a project, you don't want a lot of change. So you'd monitor it, control the change. Integrated change control was a big thing. Like, okay, if you're going to change, it's got to be really, really important. But over time, especially with the speed of technology, you can't just wait for these projects to go and then halfway through realize, uh-oh, it's changed, or uh-oh, there's new technology, or uh-oh, what we thought was going to work doesn't work. And so there then came the world of Agile. And back in 2001, there was a bunch of 17 software developers who were running what we now call the Agile methodologies in different ways. Things like extreme programming and Scrum and FDD and Crystal and all these different, we now call them Agile methodologies, or the Agile mindset. And one of the things they kept saying was, why do we fear change? Change can actually help us. And if you have something that's very large, why not take it a little bit at a time? Kind of like what we said, the expression, how do you eat a very large meal?
One bite at a time.
One bite at a time. So we just take that and maybe chew on it to make sure we digest properly. Well, why don't we take some of these very large, projects or improvement initiatives and break them into smaller iterations and take feedback at the end of that little small time period, or less time period, and then use that to then adapt and change as necessary. So that's where ITIL says, yeah, that's great. Let's use that as part of one of our guiding principles. So that's really where the progress iteratively with feedback comes from. It really is based upon that Agile mindset. We do iterations, multiple iterations, breaking something into smaller bite-sized pieces, and then as you go through, you take the feedback, adjust as necessary, and then move on to the next section. This allows you to not get too far with then saying, oh, right, well, we got to finish this project out, even though that the end result is going to be horribly out of date and it's not going to be up to speed. Well, why? Now, at this point, you've reached that point where, hey, we can back down or make a change and then continue on. So we would say that anytime you're dealing with IT service management and as organizations, primarily when you're dealing with improvement initiatives, you're going to want to do this in an iterative way, so multiple iterations. And these, by the way, depending on the type of Agile methodology you're using, I'm particular to Scrum. I'm a professional Scrum Master. And, one of the things that we do is we call sprints. Now, a sprint can be anywhere from roughly just under a month, like 3 weeks, to maybe about a week. In fact, weeks sometimes, depending on what type of software you're doing, is a little, you need a little bit more time, right? But you make these short time periods, you go through and you do the work. At the end, you review what you've done, what you might have missed, what you need to add, move on to the next iteration. Now, if you still need to redo that previous one, not a problem. You can do that. And so that is a way that you can progress iteratively, but always using that feedback. This actually allows you to do things that can be executed and completed in a much more concise, precise, and timely manner. In fact, I would like to say it allows us, instead of thinking about the big thing, we can just narrow our focus in on the thing that's right in front of us. Which, I don't know about you, Scott, but when I have something big in front of me, sometimes that can be overwhelming.
Absolutely. If you can break things into chunks and then start working on the next chunk that is achievable, it makes the project go a lot faster.
Yeah, definitely. And so that's pretty much what we're talking about here. So let's talk about the role of feedback, though. Now, feedback, of course, is vitally important. And ready? Ding, ding, ding. Well-lit room. Probably should know this. When do we talk about feedback, or when do we use feedback? We use it at the beginning, before, we use it throughout, and we use it after. If you think about it, before we start on my next iteration, I'm going to take what I've learned from the previous iteration. That's the before. While I'm working, I'm constantly going to be pinging my coworkers and other stakeholders or the customer and saying, how's it going? How's it going? And so I'm getting feedback. And then at the end, you're going to review what you've done. So again, gaining feedback, which then typically, and this is where we create these feedback loops, that then becomes the beginning of the next iteration. And so that's why feedback or feedback loops are an important part of this. You can't just do multiple iterations if you're not taking the feedback and acting upon the feedback. That is a big error that a lot of people make when they start trying to do more agile type projects, is they just think, well, we'll just do the work, and all I'm doing is taking what used to be one big project and chopping it into little pieces. And you're missing an important part, and that is the feedback, because the feedback allows you to adapt to change that has come at you and that you're facing. So very important for us to take a look at some of those things. So having appropriate feedback loops is really going to I would say help people understand, number one, where their work's coming from, where the work is going, how it's going as you're currently going, along with those type of things. And so make sure that, feedback loops are a part of what you're doing there. So Scott, I know that you've worked on several types of things, from like infrastructure type of rollouts to, just developing better software. Can you see how this can be super important in IT service management?
Yeah, in fact, I talked about the laptops, right? Yeah. Like the deployment of the laptops. Well, it wasn't enough just to say, hey, the laptops are now in inventory and we can develop them or deploy them to where new employees had them from day one. All of a sudden, when we started polling the customer, our internal customer, the hiring managers and the executives, we said, hey, where is this going? Like, what else can we improve here? And they said, oh, you know what? It'd be great if the login ID request could be requested in advance of an employee starting.
Oh,
right?
Wow.
Something little, right? So then all of a sudden, we're able to take that feedback and we're able to go and work on that to make the entire internal customer process of hiring a new employee simpler and easier and improve the whole process from that perspective.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, great example, by the way. So let's talk a little bit about applying this again. Progress iteratively with feedback, something you might be tested on. Number one is this phrase: comprehend the whole, but do something. Sometimes the greatest enemy to progressing iteratively is you want to understand and you want to know and account for everything, right? You got to check all the boxes. You got to make sure you got every I dotted, every T crossed. And the problem is this turns into what they call analysis paralysis. And, unfortunately, if you're doing that and trying to maybe get, consensus, right? Trying to get all that, and we're going to talk about that and collaborate and promote visibility. But the issue is that you're never going to get anything done because you're never willing to start, and you're never really ready to go. A great example of this is, my daughter when she first went to college. So, my daughter, because we moved a lot, we were overseas. So she finished her high school pretty much doing homeschooling. And so she was used to kind of doing little bits here, little bits there, whenever she wanted, as long as she got it done at the end. Well, her very first day, when she goes off and gets her, 4 classes with the syllabus and all her books, and she comes home and she's in tears. And she's like, I can't do this. It's impossible. And I'm like, why? And she goes, look at all this stuff I've got to do. And I go, well, hold on. I go, well, just understand. I go, is all of this due next week? And she's like, well, no. And I go, exactly. I go, well, tell you what. What's the first thing that's on the list for your syllabus here? Just pick a class. And she goes, oh, okay. And it was like, go on and post on a forum, like, who you are and, a little bit of background about yourself. Write a, 250 words, right? I go, all right, we'll do that. So she did. I go, hey, I bet you every other class probably wants you to do the same thing. She goes, yeah, they do. I go, copy, paste, put it in there. I go, guess what? You're done with your first week's assignment. And she's like, oh, well, of course, 14 weeks later, on the honors list, she's doing great, but the important point I tried to show to her, and something I had to learn, is comprehend the whole, but just start. Take a small section and do it. And then what you find is that over time, you're slowly but surely eating away at that very large initiative or that project. The other part is the ecosystem is constantly changing, so feedback is essential. If you're looking at this and saying, okay, how do I know something's going to change? Well, talk to people. Have regular communication. I mean, that's going to be coming up here in just a second with collaborate and promote visibility. But regular communication with your stakeholders, whether that's your customers, whether it's your staff, your employees, whether it's senior management. A lot of times I know we kind of, mock them a little bit and, say stuff about them. But you know what? They're important because they're the ones that are driving things. So if we're not communicating with them on a regular basis, well, again, that's when we start going one way and they're wanting us to go another. So regular communication, the ecosystem changing rapidly, let's make sure that we're on top of that. And then finally, fast does not mean incomplete. And OMG, in the words of my young ones at one point, and I've kind of gotten into my vocabulary now, I have been guilty of this, where it's like, I just got to get done. I've been told I got a deadline, and all right, I'm just going to heap up this steaming pile of stuff and throw it out there, and then I get the phone calls or the emails. Chris, where's this and that? I'm like, hey, I just had to get it done by this date, and I just went ahead and did it. And then they're like, yeah, but that actually is a really important part. And so over time, I had to learn the hard way that, hey, you know what? Just because you might need to do things quickly does not mean that you leave things off. Now, we'll talk a little bit about when we hit keep it simple and practical and think and work holistically, how you can pare those things down. But then once you have those things listed, don't ignore them and make sure that you have enough time. And that might be where some of the feedback is. Look, I know you guys want this done every week. There's no way you're going to get everything in a week. How about 2 weeks or a week and a half? And that's when you have to have those discussions. But don't leave things just laying, sorry, couldn't put that on there because I had to have it done. Fast does not mean incomplete.
But you know what, Chris?
Yes.
If we just apply the next principle that we're going to talk about in the next module, which is collaborate and promote visibility, well, then we can have a unified language of what the deliverable should be, right?
Yeah.
So with that, we'll see you in our next video.